Good morning, 11th grade. Marvelous Monday to you. Wanted to drop in and go through a few things, give a few shout outs, talk about last week's assignment a little bit, and then introduce and kind of walk you through this week's assignment and what it is that you're going to be doing. So, first off, this weekend I read through everybody's assignments, and a lot of them were really, really thoughtful. One thing that is not great, however, is that I received 15 out of 87 students who submitted the assignment this past week. So that's 17%. Not great. We just hit the halfway point of the quarter. So 5 assignments. We're done with 5 assignments. We have 5 assignments to go. So keep hanging on, guys. We got the light at the end of the tunnel where we're closing things out. I did want to share a few of my observations from some of the things that I heard from a lot of you, and then some of the things that some specific people I want to shout out. So in the beginning, I did notice a lot of the folks from CP talking about like extrajudicial killings of Black men in this country. That was a theme that, that came up time and time again. Jalen, you had a really good point talking about leadership and how it was really important, like when we had President Obama, that he was seen as this really big leader in the Black community. And your argument was basically that we need somebody centralized like that. So I thought that was interesting. I definitely got to know a lot of people who I was unfamiliar with that you all mentioned when we talked about Black leadership in America. So there were a handful of people who mentioned folks that I was like, oh, I don't know who that is. So I got a little Wikipedia reading in today. One thing that I did want to address, and I know we've talked about this in class too. So as language progresses over time, and you guys know this, there are words and phrases that become dated. And one that I've had to talk to a lot of you about since our Reconstruction unit, colored people is not a phrase that folks use in 2020. This is super antiquated. Americans stopped saying colored people around the time of the Civil Rights Movement. It sort of harkens back to days of segregation, of colored water fountains and whatnot. So avoid using that phrase. I think the confusion comes from this shift in these last maybe 5 to 8 years, where many people, and it's sort of been accepted that we use this phrase "people of color," which I think is confusing when we have colored people and people of color. So people of color is super commonly used, and it basically just means people who are not white. And that brings me to my next comment. When I was reading through Pam's, she talked about how she felt that a lot of times, even though Asian Americans were racial minorities in this country, that oftentimes, being a minority group, even among minority groups, that Asian Americans were not seen as being people of color. So I thought that was interesting. Dillian, really thorough, really great work, lots of in-text citations, and she pulled in stuff from internment from previously in the year. That was really cool. Asia Lee's also really great examples from the text. I thought Taylor and Erilyn both did a really good job of incorporating sort of their own feelings with what's going on right now into their composition. So that was great. Erilyn said that Trump was pouring gasoline on a fire of sort of anti-Asian racism. So that was a lot of powerful phrases in there. Erilyn, good work. and then tying some of that into the pressures of the stay-at-home order and how that can be tough. Jesse had kind of similar discussion around the racism piece. Anglise, I really enjoyed yours. It was super dark though. So one of the quotes, you were talking about Jeremy Lin saying, "Just accept us as humans," and then not all humans are the same, and not all of them agree and are so accepting of others in general. Can be hard, much less others who are on the outside seem to share very little with them. And then you wrote, in my opinion, the idea that the human race should be all accepting just because we all fall under the category of being human. In my opinion, it is but a laughable and very nice dream, but most likely will not happen. Woof. And then Anglise also, I have another long quote for you because I really enjoyed yours, but yours also said something about more about Trump. It doesn't help when a public figure, the president, encourages those negative opinions. It normalizes the idea that it's acceptable to put people down because of the way they look, and it leads to more hate. So really well done there. Angie talked about Trump's disassembly of the pandemic response capacity. Aaron, identified that with the demographics of Springfield, the number of Asian residents of the city is not as large as some of the other demographic groups, but he said that what he was noticing was a lot more like Asian jokes and memes online, kind of racist content that was sort of spiking. And then also Aaron, a really good point when he was saying that, I thought this was interesting, this idea of Jeremy Lin as an American being told when he lived here that he wasn't American, and then now that he's playing in China, he's viewed completely as a foreigner by them in China because he's American. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. I really appreciate the folks who took the time to write down some thoughtful things. For folks who haven't submitted that yet, please do. I look forward to reading them. There's still many of you, 83% of you, who haven't turned that in. So please do so. Now I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen so that I can walk through the work for this week. So let me pop that up here. There we go. So we're starting our final unit. It's going to be short. It's always tends to be the last unit of the year. I try to give it the time that it deserves. Obviously, this is a strange year, so it's a little shorter than usual. So it's going to be a brief look at the women's movement. This is a movement that overlaps the civil rights movement. Like when we're talking about how do most people talk about these things, as we've said before, you could certainly argue that the civil rights movement started way before Brown versus Board of Ed. You could certainly argue that the civil rights movement continues even to this day, not just with the Voting Rights Act, Equal Rights Act, all that, or Civil Rights Act, excuse me. So as you can see here, we have a new target. I can explain the goals and tactics of the women's movement in the 1960s and 1970s. So we are really chunking this down into a few little bite-sized pieces. So this week is focusing on Betty Friedan. She wrote a book called The Feminine Mystique, which was a huge bestseller. We'll talk about that in a minute. I just want to give kind of a preview of everything first. So next week, we're going to look at Gloria Steinem. She was one of the leaders of the women's movement. There's going to be a video. There's a really cool documentary called Makers that we're going to try to incorporate in there. The week after that, one of the big kind of equalizers that in the women's movement a lot of women were fighting for was access to birth control and access to abortion. Prior to that, abortion was illegal. And that was one of the things that changed with the women's movement, was abortion was made a legal medical service, and it continues to be so to this day. Obviously a divisive topic, but we're going to kind of look at why they thought that it was so important, and that they achieved that. There's going to be a video and a written response there. The final week of the women's movement, the 8th through the 12th, you have a chance to investigate feminism in the modern era. This might be a really good opportunity to look into some specific people, look into sort of the intersectionality. You know, when we're looking at women of color, you know, a lot of times historically through this movement, they're sort of not seen in as much of a way as they should have been. So that one's going to be kind of more of a digital poster type thing. Possibly this week, I might be assigning the end of year reflection, because I don't think that I can make stuff due the very last week of school, because I think grades will be closed. So I'll get that information to you soon. All right, so I'm going to move up back to this week's assignment, and I'm going to walk through for you guys what exactly it is that you're doing. So first off, you have a chapter of a book to read, okay? If you click here, it's going to pop up this document, which is the first chapter of The Feminine Mystique. It is 20 pages. Imagine like a little book. It looks huge on my screen because I have it crazy blown up. But all of you, whether you're in CP or honors, are going to be reading this. And as you read, so for CP, as you read, you're going to be identifying quotations that jump out at you that you think best explain the chapter as a whole. So what I imagine is as you read, you're sort of jotting down different quotes, and then when you get to the end and you can kind of think, okay, what was that all about? And then you look through your quotes and choose one. Starting with that quote, you're then going to write a one-page summary. So you'll probably still use those notes that you took, but you're going to need to decide what you're going to include, what you're not going to include, type up that summary, upload it to Unified Classroom. For honors, you have a little bit of a more college-y prompt. So you're going to be reading the chapter, responding to minimum 2 pages. That's the usual 12-point, double-spaced, et cetera, et cetera. So the question is, what is the problem that has no name? That's the focus of this entire chapter. It's the title of the chapter. I am not going to define it for you right now, so you're going to need to think through that on your own. I am more than happy to hear that you guys are talking to each other about this. You don't need to be on an island as you process this. Maybe you want to video chat your friend and read it together. I don't know. Work together if you'd like. Just do the writing on your own. So what does this problem look like, and what is done to try to fix it? What is the experience of American housewives based on Betty Friedan's research? And you want to include at least 3 direct quotes. So that's our work for this week. If you want to stop listening now, that is fine. I am going to proceed and read the first page or 2 for you guys, and that'll be a wrap for now. As always, I am doing my best to respond to people. I know I have like assigned office hours where I always am checking Remind and email, just like every teacher does. If you've messaged me, you know that I'm generally pretty quick to get back. With the exception of maybe Miss Dorn the other day. I missed your message somehow and it took me a whole day to get back to you. I'm usually very quick. I am doing my absolute best to support you guys. I can't read your minds though. If you're confused about something, think about it, reread it, ask your friend, or message me. I'm more than happy to chat about these things. All right, so I'm going to move on to this first chapter, and then I wish you all good luck, and I hope everybody has a nice week. Chapter 1, the problem that has no name. The problem lay buried, unspoken for many years in the minds of American women. It was a strange stirring, a sense of dissatisfaction, a yearning that women suffered in the middle of the 20th century in the United States. Each suburban housewife struggled with it alone as she made the beds, shopped for groceries, matched slipcover material, ate peanut butter sandwiches with her children, chauffeured Cub Scouts and brownies, lay beside her husband at night. She was afraid to ask even of herself the silent question, is this all? For over 15 years, there was no word of this yearning in the millions of words written about women, for women, in all the columns, books, and articles by experts telling women their role was to seek fulfillment as wives and mothers. Over and over, women heard in voices of tradition and of Freudian sophistication that they could desire no greater destiny than to glory in their own femininity. Experts told them how to catch a man and keep him, how to breastfeed children and handle their toilet training, how to cope with sibling rivalry and adolescent rebellion, how to buy a dishwasher, bake bread, cook gourmet snails, and build a swimming pool with their own hands, how to dress, look, and act more feminine and make marriage more exciting, how to keep their husbands from dying young and their sons from growing into delinquents. They were taught to pity the neurotic, unfeminine, unhappy women who wanted to be poets or physicists or presidents. They learned that truly feminine women do not want careers, higher education, political rights, the independence and the opportunities that the old-fashioned feminists fought for. Some women in their 40s and 50s still remember painfully giving up those dreams, but most of the younger women no longer even thought about them. 1,000 expert voices applauded their femininity, their adjustment, their new maturity. All they had to do was devote their lives from earliest girlhood to finding a husband and bearing children. By the end of the 1950s, the average marriage age of women in America dropped to 20 and was still dropping into the teens. 14 million girls were engaged by 17. The proportion of women attending college in comparison with men dropped from 47% in 1920 to 13% in 1958. A century earlier, women had fought for higher education. Now girls went to college to get a husband. By the mid-50s, 60% dropped out of college to marry, or because they were afraid too much education would be a marriage bar. That means like got in the way. Colleges built dormitories for married students, but the students were almost always the husbands. A new degree was instituted for wives, PhD, putting husband through. That was a joke. Then American girls began getting married in high school, and the women's magazines, deploring the unhappy statistics of these young marriages, urged that courses on marriage and marriage counselors be installed in high schools. Girls started going steady at 12 and 13 in junior high. Manufacturers put out brasiers with false bosoms of foam rubber for little girls of 10. And an advertisement for a child's dress sizes 3 to 6X in the New York Times in the fall of 1960 said, she too can join the man trap sect. Read this next part. By the end of the 50s, the United States birth rate was overtaking India's. The birth control movement, renamed Planned Parenthood, was asked to find a method whereby women who had been advised that a third or fourth baby would be born dead or defective might have it anyhow. Statisticians were especially astounded at the fantastic increase in the number of babies among college women. Where once they had 2 children, now they had 4, 5, 6. Women who had wanted careers were now making careers out of having babies. So rejoiced Life magazine in a 1956 page of the movement of American women back to home. I'm going to stop there. You can read on your own. That's all for me. I hope to all of you that you have a great week, that you're taking care of yourselves, that you're being smart, and I miss you. And please reach out if you have any questions or if you need anything. So long.